Hi guys, what's up? So I introduced this channel saying there were not going to be a lot of gear videos, and my second ever real video is a gear video. There's several reasons for this. So first of all, I'll never throw away a good opportunity, and these things seem to grab a lot of likes. But on a more serious note, I'm really making a gear video because I think we look at gear wrong. A lot of the kind of like reviews and oversight is this kind of like competition who has the coolest stuff. These little explanations, about the technical quality of the cameras. And I think that gear can be a really important part of a photographer's progress, but we have to look at it a little bit differently. So that's what I want to do today, a different look at gear. I say often that gear and discussing gear is not very interesting to me. And that's actually not entirely true. So it is very interesting to me, but perhaps not in the way that people expect. What I'm not a fan of is this comparison between cameras on terms of their, the kind of images they give, or the image quality, or different lenses, different amounts of sharpness, different color rendition. To me, these things all seem fairly insignificant and irrelevant. However, I do actually think gear is very interesting because it can play a very important role in how we shoot and in how we develop as photographers. And this is what I want to go into today. And I'm not just going to talk about cameras and lenses and why I use what I use and how I got there, but also some other items that perhaps we don't really see as photography gear, but to me actually have a bigger influence than what camera I'm using. So let's get into it. So first I want to talk a little bit about my history of gear and cameras, because I think it highlights a very interesting point about how it can be part of our different phases as photographers. So I actually started out on a Polaroid camera, and this was very important to me. There's going to be a longer video about my entire development of style and how I got where I am today. But very briefly, I really started taking pictures as a therapeutic measure for myself. I'd always gone on long walks, and I saw a lot of beautiful things on these walks. And I really wanted to kind of like journal what I saw and the stories I encountered, kind of as a way to make myself feel like I actually experienced something and like I really exist, and to keep track of the days, really very therapeutically. And a Polaroid camera was perfect for that. If I had picked a digital camera, the learning curve of really just having to take these pictures, then put them on the computer, and then editing them would have been just too much for me mentally. I would have not been in that place. An analog film camera would have been even worse, like a 35mm or a 120 film camera would have been even worse because of the whole process of scanning and editing. Whereas the Polaroid camera literally gave me something tangible instantly. And that really helped me to get into photography, because I could just click a picture and instantly create something that was entirely new to me, and I could instantly see what I made. I could never replicate it again. Because of that, those pictures had real value as memories. And in the beginning, that was what photography was about to me, to make these memories and to hold on to these moments and to hold on to these thoughts. And because of that, only a Polaroid camera could have given me that feeling in that way. So in this way, the gear that I used really made photography worthwhile for me, and I could not have done that with another piece of kit. And then I moved to 35mm film because I started to get really into photography. I thought suddenly, look, I'm not just making moments, I'm really kind of creating something here, and I want to explore this further. I want to also make things that are beautiful, not just, capture things for myself, but I also want to create stuff. I want to, make things and share them with the world. And I could do that with a Polaroid camera, but it was very expensive because it requires a lot of practice. And those mini Fuji films are fairly cheap, but they're still way too expensive to just be shooting 3 or 4 packs a day. So I went to a 35mm film camera. That's actually this one here. This is a Voigtlander Vitoret DR. It's made in West Germany somewhere in the 70s. And I picked this up for like 20 bucks. And I didn't know much about cameras then. I really didn't know much about photography. I didn't know much about film. And this camera is basically broken in every way, I found out with time. So the lens is full of fungus. The rangefinder is not coupled correctly. It basically it ends at infinity at about 1.5 meter. So I actually, for 2 months straight, shot everything focused at about 1.5 meter. The shutter speeds are not correct and it keeps hanging at 60, just stays open. The diaphragm doesn't really open at the stops that it says. And the meter is so old that it's shifted by a couple of degrees. So really, this camera there was basically no control over it whatsoever. And the funny thing is that I thought there was. And so for 1, 2, 3 months, I was shooting with this thing, and every roll came back with just completely blurred out, fucked up pictures. I'll put some in here if you can see them. That just made me feel like I was a shitty photographer, but they also made me discover kind of the beauty in abstraction and the beauty that can come from little mistakes. There were basically all the pictures that were good that I took with this, and I wouldn't consider them good now, but I consider them good then, were happy little accidents. There were no pictures where I was really in control. And so this really developed this kind of feeling in me to really just go for atmosphere and feeling, and it opened my mind to the fact that what makes a picture beautiful and magical is not really tangible or something you can fully control, but it's almost like a spiritual thing that just comes to us from time to time. And although I'm a lot more of a control freak now and think a lot more about how I shoot, and I have a camera that actually does what I tell it to do, this did open my eye to the kind of spiritual experience of photography. So it was very important in my development. And this was a way that a piece of gear that was actually faulty contributed to my development and my love of photography. And I think that we can also achieve this kind of thing ourselves more deliberately, by, for example, taking something like a Holga or any other like really cheap lo-fi film camera that doesn't really have very sophisticated focus control and a very bad lens, and we can kind of rediscover ourselves. Sometimes when I have no motivation and no inspiration at all, I'll still take this out and take a couple of shots, and there's no control, so there's no way for me to fail, which is really comforting in a certain way. And this is really a way in which a different kind of gear can help us move forward. So when I switched to a modern digital camera, for me, that spirituality that I had with my film camera and that feeling of memory and of the conscious act of photographing, yet still being surprised of the outcomes, had kind of gone. And I really missed that. And while I actually produced my best work with modern digital mirrorless cameras, to me, there often felt something missing from the process. And this is a really difficult thing because you have these weird contradictions, Like the pictures that I made me really happy and really felt like great pictures to me. But at the same time, I also felt like I was missing something while actually out photographing. And you need the feeling, I need this spiritual feeling of enjoyment while taking pictures in order to keep doing it. So I got kind of stuck between these two things. And for me, I thought at first the solution was a digital Leica M, which I bought and ultimately sold with great pain in my heart, because it turned out that there was actually a little bit too little control for me there. And while I loved the experience of taking pictures again, and I enjoyed photography more than I did in a very long time. Every time I got home and went to edit, I had just wished that I had seen the pictures before I took it, that I wished that I had the mirrorless preview. Um, and again, this is something that made me realize something about myself and my photographic process, and that is that results do matter, but they should be balanced with the journey. And ultimately, I found a piece of gear that was perfect for that, and that is right now the Leica SL, used with only manual focus lenses. I got rid of all my autofocus lenses. I discovered that a huge part of what made photography more dead and clinical to me was the fact of just pushing a button to focus instead of seeing the image move and seeing the picture change depending on how I turn. And this really seemed like a very insignificant thing, but it really was not to me. Suddenly, when I started using manual focus lenses again, I really had this sense that, I was almost dreaming. And I could, for example, completely, put it out of focus and just walk around at night, just seeing like bokeh balls floating around, completely altering my vision of reality, which is really what photography is about to me. It's just these kind of like hidden worlds that we can discover. And manual focus lenses brought that joy back. Yet at the same time, they also gave me full control over how my image looked. And it was me and not the camera that decided when a picture was perfect. And then the other thing that this camera, rather than any other camera with manual focus lenses, did for me was to take away all distractions from photography. This camera was made in 2015, and when it came out, it was one of the fastest autofocusing and fastest shooting full frame cameras ever made. But right now, in 2021, it is relatively slow and relatively simple, which makes it amazing for me. When I was out with my other cameras, I often shot 5,000-6,000 pictures in a day. Whereas here, I come home with 150 pictures, most of which are variations of 10 different images that all seem very dear to me. And it's really beautiful to me that simply the simpler layout combined with the great degree of control that you get with manual focus lens and a really good big EVF creates this kind of balance where I'm thinking more and actively enjoying more, but shooting less with the same amounts of results. And this is really, to me, what gear mostly is all about. It's not very interesting to me to think about megapixels or image quality or how a different sensor and a different lens make your images look different, because that's going to go in the edit, and in the end, I'm going to give it my own flavor, and any picture with any camera would ultimately probably look about the same to me. But what really changes the images is the way you frame, the way you take them. And I think that we should think about gear primarily as something that influences that. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is the importance of some non-photographic gear for our photographic journey. Stuff we don't think about as photography gear, but that actually has a tremendous effect on our success at taking pictures. And a lot of these things fall into two categories for me, and that is gadgets and clothes. And I want to take some of my favorite items and how they've actually really contributed to my photography and why I think it is important. So, photography is, like all creative endeavors, very, very fragile in that it is quite difficult, no matter how much we love it, to really, just go and do it. And it is very easy to come up with excuses not to be able to. And that means that any form of discomfort can not just distract us, but actually stop us from taking pictures. And this is something I never really heard anyone talking about, but if you are out on the street and it starts raining and you are wearing a jacket that doesn't cut out the water, or you are exposing your head or your lenses to that water, making them blurry and fill up, that is literally just external factors stopping you from taking pictures you could have taken. Um, while it was completely avoidable by paying attention to some other gear that really could have helped you. And I want to give a couple of examples of my favorite items and how they help me with photography. So here are a couple of pieces of gear that are non-photography related but have had a huge effect on how successful I am at taking pictures. The first of all is shoes. And I know it sounds silly and kind of weird. This is not a sneaker channel. It's not going to become one. But generally finding the most perfect, comfortable kind of shoes for you can make a huge difference in how successful you are as a photographer. So at my high point, I was walking about 2 marathons a week, meaning that, you know, I averaged about 12 kilometers a day, which is over 80 kilometers per week, walking around taking pictures. And, you know, I really had this experience where my feet would like cramp up and my nerves would become overly sensitive and I would have to stop and go back halfway through. And finding a kind of shoe that makes sure that you stay comfortable during that entire time can make a huge difference, not just in protecting your, you know, foot health, but also in how good a pictures you take. Because if you are just walking around constantly in pain or constantly worrying about how far you're gonna have to walk, like, it's gonna affect how much you can actually enjoy the process and how much you can just lose yourself into photography and forget about it. And, you know, we can all have this kind of like hardcore attitude of, yeah, it doesn't matter if your feet bleed, you just keep walking, you just keep shooting. But let's be completely realistic. Most of us are not that hardcore, and most of us will at some point get distracted. So finding some shoes that make you comfortable to walk all day, every day, is absolutely essential in my eyes. So for me, I'm not being paid to show this, by the way. For me, it are always the 95s. Like, they're built basically, they have the grip and support of like a hiking boot, but the comfort of a sneaker. And I know they're basically just high heels for men. They're probably not good for my foot on the long term because I'm always elevated like this. But my main problem is always that the bottom of my feet gets sore. It's not necessarily that the walking itself, it's just at a certain point it feels like the bone is coming through my feet. And to have these like constant high cushions all over just really helped me. Like, I've tried a lot of different shoes and sneakers and hiking boots, and these are the only shoes I can walk but also stand still on for really long extended periods of time. And I highly recommend looking for a shoe that works for you. Might not be the same, but it can really make a massive difference if you're serious about street photography. The next one is probably my most important one, except for camera, and that is a pair of noise cancelling headphones. I literally could not take pictures the way I do and for the amount of time that I do without them. The ones I'm using are like a Bang & Olufsen, I think they're called the H9 version 3. And to me they're the most comfortable and the most relaxed and non-oppressive in terms of sound, which is of course a very personal thing. But to me the most important thing is that they're noise cancelling and they're comfortable. And the reason I need these is, first of all, I'm very, very sensitive and I get overloaded a little bit quickly. Which means that if I have the city noises, my head is really trying to follow every different conversation at the same time. And it's not this soothing kind of blur, it's literally just all coming in very quickly. And within 15 minutes, I will be just burned out and I basically have to go and sit in a cafe for a bit. Whereas with my noise cancelling headphones and some nice jazz or instrumental hip hop, the entire world becomes one ballet convention. And then when I walk around at night and I listen to some nice synthwave, everything becomes Blade Runner. So it has two main functions. It protects me from being overly sensitive, and gives me more energy and focus on what I'm taking pictures of. I'm not being distracted by sound, takes away one sense kind of to give more space for another. And then it also makes me feel like I'm in a movie, and it kind of sets the mood for the kind of pictures I'm taking. I'm constantly switching genres and trying different things also to see how it influences how I shoot. Then there's the kind of third function, which is it gives a kind of social barrier, meaning that I have an excuse to pretend I didn't hear someone calling me, in case someone gets aggressive, or in case someone doesn't like their picture taken, or does like it but I just don't feel like conversation. Um, it also just makes me more in my own world, and therefore at the same time just makes me less threatening to other people. I don't know what it is, but there seems to be something about wearing headphones and you're just kind of like locked away from the rest of society. That is really useful for me, also artistically, because I kind of need to see people not necessarily as people, but kind of as archetypes, for the way I photograph them, which any kind of social barrier really helps. So these are absolutely essential to me, and maybe not to you, but if you've never tried them, you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. Then the next essential item. So perhaps this is not very essential to most people, but it's really helped me focus more and feel a little bit more zen. And that is a wristwatch. So basically, time is the only thing you really have to keep track of. The only thing I really have to keep track of when I'm shooting, because I need to know when I need to stop, when I need to be places. And if I can just look and see it on my wrist, instead of opening a phone that's also gonna have 100 notifications and different temptations to distract me, that makes a huge difference. So if you find yourself kind of like needing access to time, but often being distracted by your phone, like, I don't know, but to me, I remember times when I have to check the time. I looked on my phone and I forget to even check the time, and before you know it, I'm scrolling through Instagram. And this took care of that bad habit for me. This way I am never late anywhere, but I also am not constantly distracted by my phone. So it is absolutely essential for staying focused on anything, including photography. And then last but not least is a loose-fitting jacket with ridiculously big, easily accessible pockets. So usually when I'm out shooting in the rain, I don't like using a camera bag, because opening and closing them and switching lenses from a camera bag just takes too much time and has too much risk of water getting in and involved. So I started using these like vintage barbour jackets. I have like 3 of them. They're supposed to be like a tight jacket, but I buy them in XXL and wear them as a trench. And they're super light, they're waterproof, and most important to me, they have these huge pockets that are very easily accessible. And when I'm out shooting in the rain, I literally just drop everything in those pockets and take it out again. I can easily put my camera in the pocket if I want. And the pocket isn't like fully waterproof, but it's easy enough to just shimmer it off. Might be a very niche thing, so this is not something that I think maybe everyone should go out and buy, or that's helpful to some people, but it's just a small way. I want to explain in how a non-photographic piece of gear have really made my life a lot easier. And I can think of plenty of other examples. I'm very curious to hear if you guys have situations like this as well, where a non-photographic piece of gear really made a difference in how easy it was to photograph, how easy it was to keep motivated and focused. So let me know in the comments if you have any. I'm very curious finding out, but those were mine. So that's it for today's videos. I hope you guys enjoyed it. To me, this really was a video I've been wanting to do for a while. It's definitely way too long to do on Instagram, so I'm glad I have this channel now to do it. Because I really think that discussion about gear is kind of like skewed towards Either people really hate it and think it's superficial in general, or and say it doesn't matter at all, or people are really just hung up on, which camera is gonna make my pictures look better. Whereas I think there is this sweet spot in between where gear is very important, but it's really important in the way that it makes your life easier, it makes photography more fun, and it helps you develop the style you want to develop. And so I wanted to share a little bit how it has affected me and how I look at these things, and hopefully you guys found it useful. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you have any interesting experiences with gear changing the way you shoot or influencing the kind of pictures you take. And have a great weekend.